Keith Simmons is basically a Bible of anecdotes, an encyclopedia of behind the scenes of show business and pantomime, musical and comedy, a writer, a producer, director and historian, but whatever he brings, it definitely is happiness and laughter. He's a good man who loves the business. Once one half of the Simmons Brothers, a near music sensation similar to the Everly Brothers, but then a wonderfully funny comedy double act, and now working within the very funny and talented Simmons and Simmons with his son Ben. Together they write pantomimes and scripts, and as you find out, Keith has written for the best in the business. He's a joy to chat to, so sit back, relax, grab a coffee and some biscuits, and maybe some cake, and maybe even some popcorn, and enjoy the voice of the wonderful Keith Simmons.
Hello, Steve. How the devil are you?
I'm the devil. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You're in Eastbourne, I'm in my lounge in Dartford, and social distancing gone mad, isn't it?
It's crazy, isn't it? But here we are talking, and we're talking about what we love to do and what we really miss at the moment.
It's frightening, actually, when you think about it. But we'll get through it, won't we? We'll all get through it somehow.
It's more positive. The last few days, there may be a vaccine. Donald Trump's gone home, and Spitting Image is back.
Yeah, that's true.
We've got to keep positive. Keith, you grew up around entertainment, didn't you? Your parents were singers? Were they both musicians or singers?
No, Mum and Dad were both musicians.
Musicians, yes.
Yeah, although Dad was primarily a toolmaker at Matchless Motorcycles in Woolwich.
Oh, wow.
But that was his all-time job, but he also was a professional musician for a few years. He played in the Ken Firmin Orchestra at Lions Corner House, Coventry Street, London.
Wow.
And he was a great trumpeter, but he could play anything. He could play drums, piano, all the brass instruments. He was a brilliant musician, and really it was a shame that he wasn't a professional musician all his life.
No, and he wouldn't blow his own trumpet, would he? But you could do that for him.
That's right. and actually, during the blackout in the war, he fell over a parked car in the blackout and broke both his front teeth and lost his, what they call the embouchure, you know, and although he could still play the trumpet, he didn't have as great a tone as he always used to have.
Oh, that's a shame. I mean, it shows how important teeth are for musicians, as it would be for a ventriloquist. I worry about losing teeth because the way my teeth are actually placed would actually be how I present the ventriloquist technique. And I've been doing this for 33 years, and so if my teeth change in the slightest, it could change completely everything I do. So for a musician, that must be heartbreaking as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, actually, my great friend Alan Stockwell, who I was speaking to yesterday, he used to be an actor called Pavlov's Puppets. Him and his wife Brenda.
I've heard of them. Yes.
Yeah, they're great, lovely people. They live down in Kent, in Sparden in Kent, and we were talking yesterday, and he's got a bridge in his teeth, and it came away, and I couldn't believe it. He said he paid in 2017. He paid 950 quid to have this bridge fitted, and it's just come away, and he's got to go back to the dentist to have it done. And I thought, you pay all that money, you'd think it would last a bit longer than 3 years, wouldn't you, actually?
Yeah, you do.
But as an ex-puppeteer, he's not worried about what happens with his teeth, I suppose.
He could be behind the scenes, can't he? And
exactly.
There's a lot of miming.
Right.
Yeah. I can picture you, Keith, sat there in a theatre, glancing up, watching a pantomime or a variety show, sitting there in awe, knowing that you were going to follow into the business from that day on. What was the first moment where you looked on the stage, or was it within the family?
Well, I suppose it was the family, partly because my eldest brother Dennis, who died when he was 19 of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
But he was a ventriloquist, basically.
Wow.
And he used to do Youth Takes a Bow shows with Brian Mickey, who was like it was the X Factor of its day, I suppose, talent shows.
Okay.
Live talent shows touring round. And when Brian Mickey was in a certain town and didn't have many people other than singers or musicians, he'd phone or get in touch with Dennis and say, would you come along and go into the show? So Dennis used to tour around doing Youth Takes a Bow, making out he was from that particular town at the time.
Oh, amazing. How much older to Alan was he and to you?
Dennis was the firstborn. There was 5 years between Dennis and my brother Vic, who is still around. Vic was a tea taster for his professional life.
He didn't work in IT. He worked in tea, didn't he?
He's the only one. He didn't get into the business. But so there was 5 years between Dennis and Vic. Then there was 6 years between Vic and Alan. And then there was 7 years between Alan and I. So I don't know what my dad was up to, actually.
Well, he had a 5-year break, didn't he, in between, I guess.
Exactly. So Dennis was being very successful. Funnily enough, he did a show. We know he worked at Hackney Empire one time. And Alan and I, when we first did a show at Hackney Empire, it was quite emotional to know that our eldest brother had been on that stage as well. You know, so.
I imagine it was. Yeah, I remember seeing David Strussman at the Hackney Empire, that ventriloquist, and that's the only time I've been. But it's a wonderful little venue. But to actually follow in your brother's footsteps, that's so sad. He was 19, and I know Dennis Spicer was 29, 10 years older, you know, and that was sad. But your brother, I'm so sorry. That's sad to lose a brother that age.
Like I was very, very young. Sadly, I don't remember it. But when he was sent home, we had a chalet in the garden on a turntable that could face the sun all the time. And Mum was told he would live for 3 months, and he lived for 3 years in that chalet. Oh. So unbelievable. But so they used to take me down to say goodnight to him each night, but I sadly don't remember that. So but I've got some great photographs of him and his dummy. His dummy was called Joe King, and
that was nice.
And it was a Davenport's dummy. And of course when he died, that went back. But Alan, we did have a couple of older dummies at home, and Alan started picking them up and teaching himself ventriloquism, and he became a great ventriloquist, actually. Brilliant lip control. Yeah. And we used to use that in our acts, the Simmons Brothers.
Oh, did you? Brilliant.
We'd do a thing where we'd get which a lot of people do now, I believe you do it as well, get a man and a woman out the audience and use them as the dummies. Now people use false jaws.
Brilliant.
But then it was just tapping them on the shoulder to open their mouths.
Yeah, I remember Wayne Dobson did it, Dennis Spicer did it. I know, a lot of events actually did.
I first saw Dennis Spicer do it on the London Palladium. He used Bruce Forsyth and the dancer Angela Bracewell as his male and female dummies.
Wow.
And that's the first time we ever saw it done on television.
Oh, incredible. So you were inspired by your family then, which is so nice to actually be going into a business where you've been inspired by your brother and your parents.
Mum was being trained as a concert pianist, and then she lost both her parents by the time she was 14. Oh. And so she got a job working in Woolworths, playing the piano, demonstrating sheet music. And her piano teacher came in and saw her doing it one day and refused to teach her anymore because she was a classical pianist and wanted Mum to go into that line, and thought it was terrible that she was in somewhere like Woolworths playing the piano. That's where we got our steps gag as well, because Mum said,
"Oh, is it really?"
People come from the music publishers to promote their sheet music, and a guy called Jimmy Carlisle was with her for a week, and he used to say to people, "I'll just go down the cellar and see if we've got that." And he'd go down the cellar, make out he was going down the steps behind the counter.
Yeah.
And that's Mum told us about that, and that's where we latched onto that gag, actually, and then added a lot more things to it. We did it in our act.
You know, that's where I've seen you and Alan do that, the Simmons Brothers, and our little kids are growing up, and I even do it now. I do it behind the couch just to make my kids laugh, but my 8-year-old and 4-year-old does it, and that's inspired by the Simmons Brothers, and it goes on and on in generations, you know.
Fantastic.
It's brilliant.
Well, I just had a message from a great guy called Roy Bottomley, who is a drummer.
Oh, yes.
And he sent me a message saying, "Have you seen the Lace Weights advert on television? They've pinched your steps gag." I haven't seen it yet, but apparently someone does it in the advert. So
well, there you go. It's all out there in the ether, isn't it? My first memory of seeing you live, Keith, was on the Keith Harris show in a summer season in Weymouth, 1989 or 90. And that was wonderful, just to see my first ever variety show when I was 14.
Fantastic.
So you worked with Keith. What was it like working with Keith and Bobby Crush on that? Do you remember that season?
Oh, we had a great season. It was, and the business was brilliant, and the audiences were fantastic. It was like packed every show.
Yeah.
And we had a great summer there, and lovely people. Keith Harris, what a great guy, Keith. And I've had the pleasure now of working with his daughter, Kitty. She was a dancer with Ben and I. Up in Lytham St Anne's, we've done our last 3 pantomimes up there at the Lowther Pavilion in Lytham.
Yeah, isn't she a talent?
She was dancing on the first of those pantomimes.
Oh,
Very talented lady, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
But that summer season in Weymouth, I remember Ben used to. I was staying in a hotel down there. I can't remember what hotel it was, but so we must have been getting quite good money. I was in a hotel, and Alan was, I don't know if Alan was in his caravan. I think he was. He had a caravan at the time. But yeah, we just had a great season there. And Bobby Crush, brilliant pianist, lovely guy. And it's lovely when you stay friends with these people, isn't it? I still hear from Bobby. And
it's lovely, yeah.
And it was just a great summer show. It really was. And then the following year, Keith Harris rang us and said, would you like to do the season with me again in Blackpool? And he didn't tell us what the venue was. And Bobby, I then found out, wasn't going to do it. So it was Keith Harris and ourselves and a couple of other acts. But it was at a place called the Sandcastle.
Yes,
in Blackpool.
Yeah.
But it was like a family room, and it was nothing like as good a season as we'd had at Weymouth.
Oh, that's a shame.
There were children. It wasn't a proper theatre. There were children running about all the time.
Oh, so it was like a cabaret, almost like
night, we were using smoke machines.
Yeah.
Not us, but the actual show, the production.
Okay.
And the alarms all went off, and the roof opened, and the fire brigade arrived.
No.
To put the fire out.
Wow, it's like the Thunderbirds had turned up. Crazy.
Yes, that's right. We had a long summer season there. It wasn't certainly not as enjoyable. And when I tell you the most exciting thing that happened was we went in one day and Keith Harris said to us, there's someone to see you in your dressing room. And when we went in our dressing room, he got a donkey off the beach and put it in our dressing room. And that was one of the most exciting things that happened.
As a bit of a prankster, was he? That's brilliant. It's nice that.
Yeah. Mind you, I did get to know that season. I got to know very well Bobby and Myra Roberts from Roberts Brothers Circus.
Yeah,
we at the Tower Circus in Blackpool. I used to spend a lot of my time up there with them. It was great.
Yeah, I saw Bobby just after the first lockdown. I went on to do Skegness, and I stopped at Peterborough to see Bobby and his family. And it was sad that we lost Moira recently, didn't we? And she was lovely.
Terrible.
Always lovely to me and Lodge, she was when I turned up.
He's a smashing bloke, Bobby. And what amazed me, because they had animals then in the Tower Circus, he had four elephants. And he took me down to where they were kept one day underneath the Tower Circus itself. And he just shouted an instruction at these elephants, and they all started peeing. It was just unbelievable. But he could instruct them to do that so that they could go into the circus ring and not disgrace themselves in front of the audience.
Wow. What do you think he said? Is that waterfall? What do you say?
You know, I can't remember the words he said, but I wish I could sometimes and just use it on myself.
Ice and Teeth.
You were all over television after I saw you on that season. You were on the Ron Lucas show, which was incredible to see you on there, and the Des O'Connor shows, all the variety shows you seemed to be on, you and Alan. It's brilliant, because there was Morecambe and Wise, Russ Abbott and Bella, Cannon and Ball, Little and Large, the Crankies, and then the Simmons Brothers come along. And you guys were so fresh, really fresh and funny. And I remember the illusion that you did, where you get in the illusion box on the Des O'Connor show.
Yeah, the sword cabinet, yeah.
Yes.
Ben and I are still working that. I mean, it's a strong. Funnily enough, we're doing a Christmas show this year, Ben and I, as Simmons and Simmons,
brilliant,
down in Barnstable in North Devon.
Okay.
And the guy who's booked us for it, a lovely guy called Lee Waddingham, he said, "Would you do the sword cabinet for us? Because people still request it, and it is a very strong routine. We dreamed it up years ago, Alan and I." It started out as a pantomime thing called the Magic Fairy Frame.
Yes.
And it was a thing where the comic would go in this box, and then people would come on and ask to see a famous celebrity, and then the comic in the box had to dress up as them and do an impression. That was the idea of that. And we first started trying to do something like that with it, but slowly it evolved into a magic trick and a sword cabinet pushing the swords through.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's so funny. I even saw you, I think I was 15. I went to see you with Des O'Connor at the Woking when you done Panto with Des. And that's when I first met you and got that picture with me, you and Alan. I was so pleased you were in the show. I only went because you were in the show, but then I got to see Des
really?
work as well.
Oh, how nice. Thank you. But no, we did 3 pantomimes with Des at Birmingham, at Woking, and I'm trying to think where the other one was. There were 3 of them anyway. But he was another great character, Des O'Connor.
Yeah.
I love working with people like that. And then he suddenly said to us, "Look, lads, I'd like you to do my television show." And at that time, he had this brilliant chat show, the Des O'Connor Show on Thames Television. And it was just superb. On that show, Paul Anka, do you remember Paul Anka who sang Diana?
I saw him live in America about 3 years ago, and Paul was one of the greatest live vocal concerts I've ever seen. He was incredible.
Really?
Yeah, were you on with him, were you?
He actually opened the Des O'Connor Show, so we were able to say Paul Anka opened for us.
Oh, that's amazing.
But he just did 2 songs, but a lovely band. And that particular show, it was Paul Anka, Andrew Lloyd Webber was on it. The woman from Cagney and Lacey, Sharon Gless.
Yes.
She was a guest on it. And Cindy Crawford.
He always had massive stars on there. He was the Johnny Carson of the UK, wasn't he, Des?
Yeah, exactly.
It was such a big show.
Amazing. But he came in next, because we recorded it while we were doing the panto in Woking with him, and he came in next day, and he said to us, "Boys," he said, "I've got to tell you, we've been looking through the tape." He said, "Paul Anka did 2 songs, but we had to cut him down by a few minutes." He said, "Sharon Gless spoke for 10 minutes. We had to cut her down to 7. And as he was telling us this, I thought, oh, God, he's going to tell us they've had to cut us out. He said, do you know how long you did? I said, no. He said, 11 minutes. I said, oh, right. He said, we didn't cut any of it. It was so good, we've left it all in.
That's amazing. Wow.
How brilliant of him, yeah.
Yeah.
It was great.
Oh, that is good of him. He really took to you, Des, didn't he? Because of that, put you on the show.
Enough, he was appearing here in Dartford last year at the Orchard Theatre, and I went down to see him and his wife Jodie, who he met in our pantomime, actually. Him and Jodie were together.
Yeah, Jodie was. I remember Jodie was there. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, he was playing buttons and she was Cinderella, and she used to sing the big Whitney Houston number every day. I Will Always Love You. I
love you too, Keith.
Thank you. Yeah, but she used to sing that, and she used to do it brilliantly. Every performance, it was an absolute showstopper. Jodie, she's a great songwriter as well, actually. So
yeah,
lovely,
amazing. I remember they were together, and Des actually dropped her off at the stage door when I was waiting to meet you guys. She signed my book. I was one of those stage door hoarders. I was about 15. She signed my book, and Des gave me a bit of a funny look, as I think he's a bit. Stay away from my lady. But and then you turned out, and I remember the director was David White, and he brought me in the theatre to meet you guys backstage. And
yes. We did quite a few with David. He was the company manager, actually.
Oh,
David
okay,
White.
right.
He was in the corner, calling the show. And lovely guy, David. We did quite a few pantomimes with him. Oh, he brought you in, didn't he? Fantastic.
He did. It was so nice of him, because I was just there to see the show and then meet you guys, and then he took me backstage, and I'm one of those little budding ventriloquist that just wanted to be around the business, Keith. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to meet people, and I wanted to watch and learn. And watching you guys was just brilliant in panto.
That's fantastic. That's lovely.
And you've done.
As a kid, I used to do it, because when we'd go on holiday with my mum and dad, I used to go to the local theatre and hang about at the stage door just to say hello to the people and meet them.
Yeah.
And great comic called Ken Roberts. I remember when he was in Worthing. and I got to know Ken many years later as a brother Walter rat. But
Right.
lovely guy. And then I remember sitting in the digs and seeing there was a violinist in the show, in that summer show, called Calvin Kay, and I saw him walk by on his way to the theatre. He walked by where we were staying, and I just ran out and talked to this man. I didn't even ask him for his autograph. I just wanted to say hello and how much I'd enjoyed the show. You know?
Oh, that means a lot to people, though, when you just do that.
Yeah,
just, you
that's
know.
right. But I used to love just hanging around theatres and seeing these people who were making their living going on stage, which is what I wanted to do.
Oh, conversational.
You love your visual comedy, don't you? Such Lauren Hardy, Morecambe and Wise. But were there solo artists that you looked up to as well?
Well, yeah, and funny enough, got to work with them both a bit. Well, I've got to work with so many, but Ken Dodd and Norman Wisdom, two of my all-time favourites.
And lovely men, weren't they? Completely lovely people.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I did 11 tours. As the Simmons Brothers, we did 9 tours with Norman as his support act, and then I did another 2 tours with him, just him and I. Instead of doing his act, he used to tell his life story, and I'd be on stage with him, helping him through it, really.
Oh, amazing. Is that when you were working with Johnny Mans? Was he producing that show? Yeah.
Yeah, Johnny Mans was our agent. And actually, Johnny Mans, one Christmas, we bought him a road atlas so he could see exactly where he was sending us. Because a lot of the gigs were
they a bit sporadic,
apart.
Were they spread all over the place and not in order?
Yeah, very much so, yeah. But I do realise now, as I've grown older in the business, how difficult it is to set up a tour and make everything follow on.
Yeah,
easily.
definitely.
You know, you've got to take theatres as they are available.
Yeah,
so,
you have to go with what accepts you, don't you? I mean, opening nights, Glasgow, Scotland. Second night, Cornwall. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's not out of choice, is it?
That's the thing. Not only are we performers, we're professional drivers as well, aren't we? You know?
Yeah.
And unless you've got someone driving you around, you are doing it yourself.
I know, you've got to be a good driver.
One day we were going to a gig, funny enough, I think it was in Eastbourne, and then Alan and I set off and I was driving. And I think I'd driven about 6 miles, and I said to him, "I'm sorry, you're going to have to take over. I'm feeling ever so tired." Unbelievable.
6 miles, yeah.
At least we were able to share the driving, you know. And the same with Ben and I. Now we're working together. A weekend share it, and so it makes it a bit easier. But solo acts like yourself, you know, when you've got to travel around like that, it's unbelievable.
You'll be surprised. Arthur Lager's got a good driving skill, actually. He gets me home.
Yeah, of course, I'd forgotten Arthur. Yeah, that's disgusting. I should have thought of that.
Yeah, how rude. I'm a double act. So we were going back to Ken Dodd. You worked on his radio series with him.
Yeah, he phoned me one day and he said, "I'd like you and Alan to do this radio series for Radio 2 I'm going to be doing. It's called Ken Dodd's Palace of Laughter. Would you come up to Manchester and read for the producer?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So we drove up to Manchester and read a couple of bits and pieces, and he said, "Yeah, fine, you're signed for the series." And then Ken rang me again. He said, because we were both with the same office then, Dave Forrester was our agent.
Yes.
Who had been Ken's agent for years.
Big name, yeah.
And he said, "Don't tell Dave that you went up and did that read-through." And he said, "Don't tell him that I organised this." He said, "So Dave will ring you in a couple of days and make out he's got this for you. So just accept it." So I was really choked. Dave Forrester rang me in his inimitable way and said, "Guess what I've got for you?" So I said, "Oh, I don't know, Dave." He said, "I've got you a radio series with someone you're very close to." Who is that, Dave? Who is it? He said, "It's with Ken Dodd." I said, "Oh, fantastic." And what was even worse, we had to pay him commission.
Oh, bless.
But, it was a series of 6 shows, and they were all done in little theatres in and around Liverpool, really. I mean, not too far from Liverpool, so we had to travel up all the time.
Yeah.
But we'd meet at Ken's house in Knotty Ash, and then go on to these places and do read-throughs and then record the shows, and they were absolutely fantastic. I mean, we'd record about 2 hours of material for what finished up to be a 27-minute show.
Yeah, it sounds like Ken Dodd. Yeah.
Yeah, but it included him doing a song as well in the show, so the actual comedy was really cut down, but we did some great little sketches with him. And Anne, or as she was then, Anne Jones, who became his wife, she was in them all. And we had some great guests. Dear old Peter Goodright, who we've recently lost.
Oh, yeah, just recently, yeah.
Yeah, he was a guest. He was on the first show, actually, because I remember we all went into, for some unknown reason, we all went into a McDonald's, having guffaws of laughter in there before we recorded this show. And a guy came up to Peter Goodright and said, "Could I have your autograph, please?" And totally missed Ken Dodd. Never said anything to Ken Dodd. He just wanted Peter's. But they were great times, and we had to do different voices and things on these sketches within the show.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be Ken touring round with this Palace of Laughter, and Alan would be the stage doorkeeper, and I'd be the dresser or something, and each show we played different characters, but it was great.
It's brilliant.
Great
it sounds
fun.
almost like an Educating Archie programme, you know, where you're all playing different characters and putting a little plays together. I like that.
Yeah,
it's a nice concept.
Right. God, I remember as a kid when we used to have Sunday lunch or Sunday dinner, really, at lunchtime. We would have the radio on, listening to Educating Archie, and how great Eric Sykes used to write for that, and I got to do pantomime with Eric Sykes.
Oh,
he was
did
one
you?
of the writers on Educating Archie.
Brilliant.
Just amazing.
Yeah, the
And how
history
great
with Eric
that
Sykes.
a ventriloquist becomes a huge success on radio. Just
I know.
incredible.
I can't even get on telly these days. I'm going to have to go for radio, I think, Keith.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, speaking of television, I mean, 36 years you and Alan worked together. Can you tell me some highlights that you cherish from your live shows or TV? What are moments that stand out for you both?
Funnily enough, doing the good old days for Barney Colan, we did 3 of those, different good old days. The first one was with Ken Dodd. The second one was with Roy Castle. And the third one was with the great Frankie Vaughan. And
incredible names.
The third one we did was the very last ever Good Old Days televised.
Was it?
So it was quite... It ran for 30 years, and then the BBC, in their infinite wisdom, decided to stop doing it. And Barney was really upset about it because it was still getting a good audience.
Yeah.
And it was a great showcase for new talent, you know, going on there. We hadn't done. We'd done one telly before that. I think we'd done a schools program some years before called Seeing and Doing. But this was a real breakthrough for us, and he gave us the opportunity. He came to see us in summer season in Bridlington. We were doing the Paul Squire show.
Okay.
Funnily enough, with who you mentioned earlier, Wayne Dobson was on it as well.
Okay.
And
good billing.
Barney came and saw the show, and he got in touch with Dave Forrester and said, "I'd really like to book the Simmons Brothers for the Good Old Days." So we went up to Leeds to do it. And when we got there, this was the one with Ken Dodd. He said, "I'm ever so sorry, boys. This is the first time ever the BBC cameramen have gone on strike. So we can't record the show, but will you still do it? We've got an audience coming." So we still did the show with Ken, and then he booked us again to do another one, as I said, with Roy Castle, and then he booked us for the last one to do with Frankie Vaughan. And then we got booked to do a 10-week live tour with the Good Old Days, with Frankie Vaughan and with Leonard Sachs as the chairman, and
brilliant.
the boys and girls of the Players Theatre, and we toured around for 10 weeks with that.
That's amazing. It was such a success, wasn't it? And they're still showing it now, and you can see it on. Is it Talking Pictures, or there is some of the TV Gold or something do show the good old days?
Right. I'm hoping they'll show the few that we were in. So I don't know if you get repeat fees or not, but it would be.
I don't know. I think that stops now. Talking to a few people, even on BBC, doing things in the 80s where they're not getting royalties anymore. I don't know when that stops, but hopefully, you know, I'm sure Paul McCartney's not complaining. I think he still gets royalties.
I'm sure he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I did a lot of writing as well for television, especially for Brian Conley. And I do
Yes.
sometimes get checks through from the ASCAP, the American Association, and the Writers Guild of Great Britain, who I belong
brilliant.
to. And so I still get the occasional check for things I wrote for talent.
Oh, that's great. Well, you've written for Freddie Starr, Bobby Davro, Haywan Pace, Ken Dodd, Nicholas Parsons, Jess Conrad, Dave Lee, Phil Butler, mutual friends.
You've done your research. Good Lord, yes. I've written for so many people, and I love doing that. Actually, Alan and I started writing together, and we actually started writing for Brian Conley. We went to see him at a show in Blackpool. Someone told us he was looking for writers, and he was doing a show for TVS called Five Alive.
Yeah.
With Harry Seacombe's son, Andrew Seacombe, was on that show.
Okay.
And Doon McKinnon and Joanna Woods, I think her name was. But it was a great show, and it was like a team show. Oh, and Peter Piper, the comic Peter Piper, was in it.
I done a summer season with Peter. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Another great guy, and it was a really good show to write for. And we used to wrote some Private Eye sketches and things, and then they did a second series which we wrote on as well. And then
Brilliant.
Alan decided he didn't really like the pressure of writing, because you were always trying to come up with ideas for on a specific timeline, you know. So he's pulled out of it, but I carried on writing on my own because I quite enjoyed it. So,
Yeah. Do you feel like when you get a deadline, Keith, when you get a deadline, it gives you that pressure to finish that job? Was that better for you to have a deadline?
Yeah, it was.
Rather than...
And I always remember, another bit of name dropping here, we were working down at the Webington Country Club. I don't know if you ever did that, down near Bristol.
Okay.
And the guy who had a house up the road from it was Frankie Howard.
Oh, wow.
And he came in one night to watch the show, and then he sent a message, would we go and join him at his table? So we went and joined him and had a drink with him. And I always remember him, he said to me, I really like your comedy, he said, because the way you play it, you're like a vulnerable character. He said, but always remember, the best comedy comes out of desperation.
It's true though, isn't it?
That's when it comes to writing. You do get a bit desperate when you're writing stuff, and it is when you're trying to meet a deadline, and you do get a bit desperate with it, and hopefully that's when the good ideas come.
Yeah, I guess so. And you really have to know that act that you're writing for. For instance, you couldn't give Nicholas Parsons a mother-in-law joke. Do you know what I mean? You have to cater for that certain person. It has to. That would be for Les Dawson, say. You know.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, and Gary Wilmot. I wrote quite a bit of stuff for Gary for his television series, and it's really interesting how different people work, isn't it? And how they go about constructing things, or if you give them a series of jokes, sometimes they've got to make it suit themselves, you know, when you've written something for them. And as you say, Nicholas Parsons, I wrote for him my great story about Nicholas. I was directing the pantomime, and it had been Windsor Davies had been playing the Sheriff of Nottingham, and then the following year Nicholas came in, and so he took over. But I'd got Windsor Davies to sing Great Balls of Fire in the pantomime. I don't even know why now, but it worked. And then when Nicholas came in, I said, Nicholas, would you like to sing Great Balls of Fire? He didn't even know it. And I played him the Jerry Lee Lewis version. And to see Nicholas Parsons do Great Balls of Fire is still one of my great memories.
It's got to be a highlight. Wow.
Yeah, it really was. But he wrote to some of his friends and said, Keith Simmons has turned me into a rock star.
Yeah, I bet he didn't mind that on his list of so much that he could do. It was.
No, that's right.
That's brilliant. But a lot of us go through this business having to enter a talent competition. Now, I've had my time. Mine was Britain's Got Talent. You and Alan won Opportunity Knocks.
Because in the 70s.
You have to stay on. If you win every week, you stay on and come back, don't you? Did you have to do that?
We won. We went back the second week and were beaten by a 12-year-old Australian boy soprano.
All right.
Who I still have nightmares about that. Because I remember we did on the second show, and but this little boy, his mother was on the studio floor, and a doctor was having to administer some first aid to him in front of the audience. So we always thought he got the sympathy vote. But, probably
still happening back then.
Yeah, unfair to him, really, but he was good. But so we had 2 appearances on Opportunity Knocks, but that was a great moment. But then we did Search for a Star as well on London Weekend some years later.
Okay.
We won our heat on that. And the final, when that was taking place, we'd already been signed to appear in Pantomime with Basil Brush in Sunderland, at the Sunderland Empire.
Right, brilliant.
And then, of course, the LWT, the television company, and David Bell said to our agent, who was still Dave Forrester at this time, said, well, we need the boys for this television final. And he said, well, I can't release them from a 10-week pantomime. And he said, well, you'll have to. And there was all sorts of talk of how they were going to do it. But eventually they did pull us out of this pantomime for one night's telly, and we came 3rd of the final. So it didn't really do us any good at all. No. But it was enjoyable to do that show. I mean, we had a great time with it. Mind you, when I see the spot that we did, I think, oh dear, I cringe at it now. But it won us our heat and got us into the final. You know? Yeah,
well, I cringe at a few things that I've done that did make it to telly. But I mean, and I can't bypass working with Des O'Connor. I did on the TV talent show. He done Pot of Gold. And I did do that. There was a wonderful comedy duo called Powys and Jones, a Welsh comedy act.
Yeah, knew them,
yeah, I was on their episode actually, and this Pot of Gold actually they won, and I didn't, but I did get to work with Des for 30 seconds on. I got because you get the gong after 30 seconds, and I didn't get any further. Yeah. And that was in 95. But so, so I'm proud to say I did work with Des. It wasn't for a panto, but it was.
No, sure. So what dummy were you using then? Did you have Arthur Lager then?
No, I didn't. I had a character from a builder called Dave Showler. He was a little alien type gnome called Neon. So they were Muppet type characters, and a little girl, a girl called Tiny Tina. So I had 2 puppets. But it was quite unprofessional because there was no table. I had to walk to my spot. So these 2 puppets were dangling. It looks rubbish. and so not only don't they look real because they're not stood on tables. You literally had to stand on your spot, do the spot, and Des was standing behind you. And then after 30 seconds, he'd hit the gong and you'd run away. And they never saw me again. That was it. Powys and Jones won that, but very deservedly so. Can you tell me where the Jukebox Jury record come from? You're on Jukebox Jury. That was quite a big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that was the first thing we did in this business because we started out as singers, Alan and I, and we were trying to make it, as a vocal act. Actually, we told someone we wanted to be another Everly Brothers, and they said, "Do we need another Everly Brothers? They're good enough already." I said, "Yeah, that's true." But we got signed to a management contract by a guy called Alf Hunterman, who'd been a trumpeter with the Billy Cotton Band.
Right.
And he'd left the band. He'd left the business, actually. He was now a chemist in Twickenham, but he wanted to manage an act and still keep his finger in the business, really. So,
well, they say laughter's the best medicine, don't they?
Yeah, exactly, yes. Oh, that's good. I'll remember that.
Thanks.
But,
sorry.
We sent him a tape of some of our songs, or us singing, and he became our manager, and he took us to a wonderful guy called Michael Black, the agent Michael Black.
Yeah, I worked with Michael.
Was Don Black, the lyricist.
Yeah.
And Michael, who later married Julie Rogers, of course, lovely singer Julie.
Yeah.
He became our agent. He took us to Pie Records, where we met a man called Les Cox, who we sang in Les Cox's office. And as we approached Pie's offices, Michael told us that Les Cox had just divorced his wife. So we thought, God, he's going to be in a right old mood, this guy, when we go in. But he wasn't, actually. He was fantastic. And he said, yes, I'll sign the boys to a year's contract and we'll make a record with them.
Lovely. What was the record called?
The record was called Take Me Where the Sun Shines. It was a song
That's nice.
I'd written. And the flip side was the B-side, as you had in those days, was a song called Leanne, which was dedicated to the American singer Brenda Lee, who I was a big fan of Brenda's.
Oh, wow.
And she'd called her daughter Julie Leanne. And so I wrote this song, Leanne, and that was chosen as the B-side. But we went into the studio, and with Cyril Stapleton, who was one of the A&R men there. He was the band leader, Cyril Stapleton. And we recorded 19 of our own songs there.
That's a lot of songs, isn't it?
He handed us over to Tony Hatch, and Tony Hatch produced the record. He chose Take Me Where the Sun Shines and Leanne to be our first record, and he produced the session. And Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who wasn't Led Zeppelin then, he played guitar on our record. So
incredible! Wow, what a history!
Quite amazing. And then we had it on Jukebox Jury. It was on Two-Way Family Favourites and got quite a lot of airplay, but didn't sell that many, unfortunately. So our singing career began to slide, and our act we began to put jokes in between the songs, and slowly the comedy took over, and we made more room for comedy than songs. And
well, I'm so glad you did, mate, because it's been enjoyable watching you both. And after 36 years, though, Alan quit the duo, then replaced you with a dummy.
Because I was doing so much writing.
Yes.
Like for Connolly and so on. I had a lot of work in between summer seasons and pantomimes.
All right.
And so Alan wasn't working much in between, and then he got offered a full-time job with a company called Rainbow.
Okay.
To be their events manager. They put out costume characters like Postman Pat.
Okay.
And all those sorts of big sponge characters that people are in, you know. And he became their events manager for several years, actually. And but I realised he did miss the business and went back to his first love of ventriloquism. So he still works now as a solo act. So he actually he came back as a ventriloquist, which was his first love anyway. So instead he replaced me with a dummy.
Oh,
I carried on. I did 3 pantomimes on my own.
Oh, did you? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and each time Paul Elliott, who was the producer, he wanted me to do Simmons Brothers routines, and he said, "Would you do the sword cabinet?" And so I did that. The first pantomime I did on my own was with John Nettles, who I'd already done 7 pantomimes with. A great baddie, but it was Peter Pan in Plymouth. And actually, John Nettles said to me, "I don't want you and I to become a double act in this show." I said, "No, okay." So I didn't do a Simmons Brothers routine, but the following year, I was with Tim Healy up in Newcastle doing Peter Pan again.
Yes.
And got Tim Healy to do the sword cabinet with me, and he said it was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do to learn it.
Well, it's comedy timing, isn't it? The comedy timing for a routine like that must take so long to get right, and so for someone to not do comedy, to actually learn that, it's not easy out of the blue, is it?
No, it's not. And then the following year, I was down at the Mayflower Theatre in Southampton with Paul Nicholas.
Wow.
And a great character called Geoffrey Hughes.
Yes.
Who was Onslow in Keeping Up Appearances and Eddie Yates in Coronation Street. Absolutely lovely guy. And he was playing Smee the Pirate, and I was Starkey the Pirate. So Jeff did the sword cabinet with me there, and he said it was the hardest thing he had to do as well.
Really?
It was great.
Well, they're just hats off to Alan, isn't it, really, for actually, you know.
It is, actually, definitely. And then Ben took over. He came into it, and he was able to do the sword cabinet because he'd grown up with it. He knew what it was all about.
He knew it inside out. So how did that conversation go, asking Ben to join the act, or was it the other way round?
Ben was already, he'd done Leeds University. He'd studied classics at Leeds, doing ancient Greek and Latin. So he's too clever by half, to be honest. But he'd then gone to the School of Speech, the Royal School of Speech and Drama, Central School of Speech and Drama in London.
Yeah.
And he'd done a year there in musical theatre. He was now an out-of-work actor. So I said to him, "Why don't you join me in a double act?"
Timing. So
he did, and he said, "Well, I know all the stuff you used to do." So we only had to change bits. It became a new sort of the mechanics of it became slightly differently, but with the father and son, it worked really well. And we did pantomime in Crawley with the great Dave Benson Phillips, who was excellent. He was playing Dick Whittington. Then we did summer season in Bournemouth. And we did 2 summer seasons back in Cromer. I know you're going to Cromer again, aren't you?
I'm doing a couple at the end of 2020 to get rid of this year. It would be nice to finish in style. So, but me and you have got a love for Cromer, haven't we, Keith? It's such a great place of history.
Yeah, it certainly is. Alan and I did the second ever Seaside special there in 1978, I think it was.
Wow, your signatures are still on the ceiling, backstage.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they're up there.
That became a thing. Everyone's signing there. Well, mine's up there 6 times. I've topped the bill there 6 times, 4 with Alan and 2 with Ben. So we've had I love that place. It's just a brilliant. The atmosphere in that theatre is fantastic.
Well, the audiences that come back time after time, that they're the people that make it as well, aren't they? They just love where when Simmons come back and when I go back, they really love the acts that go back time after time, and they're very loyal up there, aren't they, in Cromer?
Yeah, very much so. I don't know if she still goes. There was a young lady.
Yes, Joanna. I know you're talking about Front Row Joe. Yeah.
Unbelievable. She was at every show and just lapped it up all the time. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I did a in the summer when Cromer started to do some variety shows. I did go and do a guest spot in this summer in August, and Jo was there, but she's called Front Row Jo. But with all of the restrictions, she's now Third Row Jo because they had to move her back a bit, But yeah, but it was so lovely to see her. It made me. It was one of my first shows back, and I was quite emotional actually seeing the whole audience, with masks on. And they actually have masks on, but there was a couple in front that had visors. These clear visors in front of their face, and every time they would laugh, their visors would steam up. So I knew how I knew how well I was going by how steamed up they were.
Great! I love that. Yeah, excellent.
Eyes and Teeth.
Ben is doing so well. I love his show on Radio Phoenix. Is it Phoenix?
Phoenix Radio, yeah. He does that from a studio in Brentwood in Essex because he lives in Shenfield in Essex, so just nearby.
Yeah.
But he's gone from strength to strength with that. The show that goes like this, and he loves doing that. I think he's done about 160 shows now.
I remember his first one, his launch show. It's so nice to know that he's still going and enjoying it. And I always pop on if I'm around and see that he's live. I try and pop on and listen in, and he's brilliant at doing it. And your rapport with your son, it's so nice. Does he mind playing the straight man in the duo?
No, he likes to get laughs, but no, we try to ease that out a bit. I mean, everyone says it's a bit old-fashioned now to be the straight man and the comic, but it still works actually. But
sure.
No, he does get laughs out, and he's become a really good writer as well. Like him and I write pantomimes together now, and
brilliant.
And we've been writing some bits and pieces for We've had a couple of, during lockdown, I mean, it's what everyone's been doing, I suppose. I know you've been working on a book. I'm working on a book. But him and I have been writing stuff together as well, for comedy bits for telly.
So you've been writing a play, haven't you, called Dead End?
Yeah, I wrote that, of course, some years ago, that Dead End. Ben and I were going to do that, but it's one of those things, it's on the bucket list that we've got to finish up performing it somewhere.
Yeah,
we might even take it up, when it all gets clear again, go up to the Edinburgh Fringe and do a cut down version of it, because it's a very unusual play, and it's just the two of us. It's just him and I. But it's,
do you know what? Let's make that a deal, Keith, because I've written a play for Arthur Lager, which I launched. It was my last show before lockdown. I want to take it to Edinburgh, but I'd love to go up there with you and Ben if we coincide in the next couple of years. So we should talk about doing it together. And I mean, it won't be a show together, but if you're there, I'd love to be there as well, doing our shows.
Great, good idea. Yes, right.
I'll
hold you to that. We'll work on that.
No, definitely.
We've also been working. We've developed a game show for television, which is a bit unusual, a bit different. But we were just planning to take it to someone, and I said to Ben, we'd better film a bit of it ourselves, do a bit just to show the idea. In March, this was.
Okay.
So we haven't got round to doing anything on that. We've written the idea, but we've got to do that as well.
Yeah, keep that to yourself, because the moment you put it out there, someone will take it. So, good luck with that, and it's important, isn't it, to get it out.
I do remember being told the film companies used to have a standard letter that they would send out to people. If anyone sent an idea for a film or a story, they would have a standard letter sent out that said, "We are already working on something along these lines."
Ah, I see.
So,
yeah.
So they could then pitch your idea and
and
not admit to it. Unbelievable.
I had a great concept for a TV show, a variety TV show, and I've got it all in copyright, and I sent it to ITV with like a lawyer's. I paid for a solicitor and stuff to send it out, and I got some advice from people I knew, and I sent it, and I didn't hear anything back from ITV, but I did see a similar show that went out about 2 years later on ITV. Just thought, I've got no backup. I paid £400 for a solicitor, and how can you prove any? Apart from the concept, it was slightly changed, and it may be coincidental, but you don't know, do you? You don't know, because maybe a lot of us think the same. But I've got ideas for movies, sitcoms. Like yourself, we're like-minded. We're sat on cruise ships or planes or backstage theatres in the car, and we've got so many ideas going through our head, and we think we could do this. Now's the time to put our pen to paper and get it out there. I think we.
Yeah, I think it is actually. It's like all the songs I wrote back in the 60s and 70s. Actually, Fran came up with a great title, because call it, if Ben puts this out when he's going to, called Pops Songs.
Okay.
So it's songs I wrote. Actually, Ben helped with some of them, and Fran helped with some of them as well. But we've got a lot of them recorded. Some just as demos, just on a tape recorder at home.
Yeah. But
some we actually went into a studio, and there's a very apt song at the moment which Alan and I recorded, called "The Light at the End of the Tunnel."
Oh, nice. We need that now. We need that out there.
And Ben and I have also got one called "Listen, Did You Hear That Sound?", which is a Christmas song. So we're putting that out as well, and we're putting out our pantomime song, which we did last year, which the great Steve Etherington produced for us.
Oh, he's brilliant, Steve, isn't he? He's brilliant. Talent.
And we're putting that out again to remind all those people who aren't in pantomime what it's all about, because it names all the pantomimes, this song, and it, although I say it myself, I was very proud of it. And
great.
So we're releasing it. It's like a mini album. I think it will be available on usual platforms,
Yeah, downloading platforms like Spotify and iTunes and all that. Oh, brilliant.
Works, it'll be available on those. So
fantastic.
There'll be quite a few tracks there, yeah.
You present a talk now called Name Dropping. People ridicule us, for name dropping, but we work with these people. We're proud of it. So why not talk about it? And people do love hearing it, but they just say, "Oh, he's name dropping again." So to call your talk name dropping, it gives you the license to actually name drop. I used to get accused of that in the Water Rats whenever I'd stand up to do a welcomes back. Or if someone got mentioned, I'd say, "Oh, I did pantomime with him," and it became a sort of joke amongst everyone. No.
But when you've been in the business 54 years,
wow.
You are bound to have worked with a lot of different people, and so I purposely called this talk name dropping because of that. But they love it. I go to clubs, women's institutes, and round tables and progress clubs, all sorts of things. And in Kent, we've got active retirement groups as well. And the only county that's got them, actually, Active Retirement Association.
Okay.
And sadly, the majority of these clubs I talk to are aged people, so they know all the names I'm talking about. But of course, as soon as lockdown started, all the meetings had to stop. So all my talks this year were cancelled. I've lost every one of them.
Oh, that's a shame. One of my name drops I have to thank you for, because sometimes if the Queen does come up in conversation, I have to thank yourself, Keith Simmons, for allowing me when you introduced me to Her Majesty the Queen in November 2014 in her own living room at Buckingham Palace. So I want to thank you for giving me that name drop, and for all our brother rats that rare opportunity. So can you tell us a little bit about that 125th anniversary? That
it came about because when I was King Rat for the second time in 2011 at the Water Rats, and we had Prince Phillip came, Captain K organised a dinner for Prince Phillip at our lodge room, a house dinner.
Yeah.
And because I was King Rat, actually he came in 2002 when I was King Rat as well, so both times I had to sit with him when we had the meal. And what a great guy. Fabulous.
Yeah.
I love
funny
him.
Man.
So funny. And after he'd left that second time, I suddenly realised that in 2014 it was going to be the 125th anniversary of the Water Rats. It started in 1889. And so I wrote to the palace, I wrote to Prince Philip's office and said, could we have a sort of soiree at the palace to commemorate this occasion?
Yes.
Our 125th birthday. And after a lot of messing about, it went back and forth for ages. They agreed.
Took a while, didn't it?
It certainly did, setting it up. And then he was going to be our guest of honour, Prince Philip. And then I got a message the Queen might be there as well. So I was over the moon, And when it was actually confirmed that she would be there, it was just absolutely brilliant. And so
it was amazing.
November the 14th, I think it was, wasn't it, in 2014? I think that was the date.
Yeah.
And 90-odd rats came to it with their partners, including yourself and Nina, and it was just the most amazing night, and I was so chuffed. And when I was asked to escort the Queen round the room and introduce her to my brother rats, that, for me, that was just incredible,
It was so
wonderful woman,
amazing.
and wasn't she lovely? I mean, she seemed to know things about people. When I introduced her to my brother Alan and his wife Julia, when I said, this is my brother Alan, she said to him, oh, you two don't work together anymore, do you?
Wow.
I'd had to send some little biogs about various people who were going to be there, and I sent quite a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And I was told, be very careful what you write, because the Queen and Prince Philip will actually read all this.
And you wouldn't think they would you? But they did.
No, amazing. But she took it all in, and she actually said to Alan, what happened? Did you have a row? And he said, no, it was a very amicable split. But I mean, the fact that she knew that, it was just amazing. And
that's lovely.
The comic Brian Burton, because he did 17 years at Windsor, I think it was, in pantomime. And when I introduced him to the Queen, he said to her, I did pantomimes at Windsor. She said, oh, yes, I know. And then he told her about the day Prince William and Prince Harry, as kids, were in watching the pantomime, and that one of them shouted out something to him on stage, and she had a good laugh about it with him. But he phoned me afterwards. He said that was absolutely brilliant. He said being able to tell the Queen about that and just talk to her. And so many of them. And Charlie Noble, who we lost a few months back, I was able to go to his funeral in Canterbury.
Right.
But his son told me after the funeral, he said that Charlie used to say, oh, that night at Buckingham Palace that Keith Simmons arranged, he said it was brilliant, and it was so lovely when he didn't say I was introduced to the Queen. He said when the Queen was introduced to me.
It is all thanks to you, and we're in debt for you for that, Keith. Yeah, I literally became a water rat on the 28th of July 2014. Like a month later, I got a letter to say we're going to be invited to Buckingham Palace, and I thought, wow, this is a good start. So this was at the beginning of my baby rat year. So it's incredible for me. Yeah, so thank you once again. I know I've thanked you in the past.
I got a lot of help from my wife and Fran, who was the administrator of the Rats at that time.
They say, don't they, behind every great man is an even greater woman, and in your case,
you're telling me,
Fran,
that's extremely true, I tell you, because she has been brilliant. And just my lovely story about that night, she was running around looking for me in the palace room, in that great room, and I'd been taken away to meet the Queen in a side room, so she didn't know where I was.
Oh.
And as she was actually almost running through the room. She bumped into someone and she stepped back, and it was Prince Phillip. And she said, "I'm terribly sorry, sir." She said, "I didn't realise you were in the room." And he said, "Of course I am. I live here." But he did say it with a smile on his face, so she was quite relieved. Right?
Yeah, I think everyone's got a story about talking to him on that night, and I think I've already talked about mine on the podcast. But it's just he talked to us individually, and then you introduced the Queen to myself and Nina. It was just a wonderful moment. And I remember after that, we stepping out of Buckingham Palace, we were all chucked out on the streets, and then. We're standing there, what do we do now? We just met the Queen. And then I'm standing there with Gary Lavini and Emma and my wife Nina, and we say, should we go to Hard Rock Cafe? So we went for a burger at Hard Rock Cafe, just across the Green Park, and it was just to finish the night off with a beer and that, to talk about what just happened. It was incredible. But I remember, do you remember poor John Bouchier had a bit of a faint, didn't he? And
yes, he fainted, yes, that's right. And my sister-in-law, Julia, who was a nurse at that time,
bless her.
She was able to administer some first aid to him.
Yeah, I remember Julia was there because I was right next to him. So Julia said, keep his head up. So I had my hand on the back of his head and she was seeing to him, and they got him some water. And I literally had my hand on the back of his head, and I was so worried because he wasn't looking at me, but his eyes were open. He was just looking up to the ceiling. But I did have this crazy little moment in me, that being in the comedy world that we are, after he was okay, I started to think about this story, but not at the time. I was terrified. But I had my head on the back of his head, and I've got this urge to have, what if I'd have turned his head to the left and the right and gone, hello, Sir Dotty, hello, Sir Dotty. I just had this little ventriloquist instinct to turn him into a little dummy. I was holding it, and obviously he turned out all right. Then I made sure he got into the taxi, and he went. How
great the fact that John is a ventriloquist himself as well.
I know. That's why I thought of it, because not only was I I was holding a ventriloquist's head. He would have laughed at that, and he's still here. I don't think I've told him that yet. I'll have to tell him that.
You really must.
Oh, mate, but you were proposed by Danny LaRue, weren't you, into the Rats?
Proposed by Danny LaRue and seconded by the great Joe Church, a
wow.
wonderful comedian. Yeah. It was a pleasure. And I'll tell you who spoke to me about the Rats before that was Wyn Calvin,
yes,
the Welsh Prince of Laughter. He'd spoken to me about it, and we were in pantomime. We did 2 tours with Danny LaRue and 4 pantomimes. But in one of the pantomimes, Danny was actually King Rat at that time, and I spoke to him, and he said, "I will propose you." So he proposed Alan and I into the order. Yeah.
That's so nice. It's nice how it comes about. I was working at the good old days with Roy Hudd, not the televised one, but it was like 2013. And Roy said, I met Roy on a few occasions and shows, and he said, "Well, I'm going to push this forward. I'm going to make you a water rat," and Roy did. He made it happen. So it's so nice to have those people in our memories.
That's right. Well, another great character, Roy. I spent a weekend with him and Debbie. Him and I were writing some material for a Water Rats ball, actually. And he said, "Come up and stay the night." So I went up and stayed at their lovely house in Suffolk. And actually, he had an island on his land with like water around it. And on that island are actual water rats. The genuine
yes, I think he told me. I did get to stay one night. Did you open the fate for them?
No, I never did that. No, it was a fate worse than death. I heard, so
I did. They put me up one night, and I did see. He walked me around that little island and in the garden.
Absolutely great. And that church on his land as well. He was the key holder to the church. He used to open that as well.
Yes. Oh, it's such a
character.
And he took me into his archive. It's not a shed; it's a wonderful little emporium, isn't it?
Incredible. I mean, just all that knowledge he had about our business, just incredible. But he used to phone me quite a lot, or I'd phone him, and the conversations used to go on for ages, but I always felt when I put the phone down, I'd learned something, you know?
Oh, yeah, you always did, didn't you, talking to Roy?
Really great, really great. Lots of laughs.
Well, you had a Lifetime Achievement Award in the British Musical Society, but some would worry that this is the end, you know, achieving life awards. But up until the start of 2020, you're still going strong, preparing panto scripts and working with Ben. Are there still goals that you want to achieve in this business, Keith?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, funny enough, because of writing this book, which, by the way, I'm calling "Could I Have a Word with You, Please?" Because that was a catchphrase in our act. And still
yeah, I remember that. I can hear that now. Yeah.
Suddenly discovered things like I found a letter the other day from John Fisher at Thames Television when he'd seen us with Des O'Connor, and he wrote to Johnny Manns and said, "I'd love to give the boys a television series," and that is still that's my ambition, to have a series. I can't see that ever happening now, but that was one of my big ambitions, to have a television series. And,
don't give up.
No, you still got to stay with it. And as I say, we're all having these ideas of things. We might still get something on there. Who knows? You know, all sorts of ambitions. I'd like to get another record out. Well, we'll have this record out soon, so there's that.
Well, there you go.
My book published next year, so
yeah, I'm the same.
There's all those things still going on.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, bless you. Just before we go, Keith, finally, thank you so much for doing this. I really admire you, and you've been lovely to me over the business since I met you in Woking in '89 till today.
I think that is brilliant that we met then, and I'm so proud that you've gone on to achieve great things. Because and when's your book on ventriloquism coming out?
Well, I don't know when it's going in yet. I need to get it into publishers, but I'm editing it still right now. What I didn't realise is I printed every page off that is in my computer because I wanted to save it, because computers die now and again. I back it up every time I add to it. I back it up. But I'm now editing it. But when I did print it off, it literally is the size of a brick, the thickness of a brick. And so it may be in 2 parts. And so I've got a lot of work to do with the editing. But I am
thinking the same with my own.
I can imagine, yeah.
I've already written 20-odd thousand words, and I'm only up to 1968.
Wow.
Absolutely ludicrous.
Can you imagine if Ken Dodd wrote his own books? Wow. I think me and you, we've got so much love to share and so many stories to tell. That mine obviously is all about ventriloquists, and your brother Dennis is in there because Alan mentioned him in our interview.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, lovely. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've interviewed Alan for the book, and so there's pictures and so you know, we've got so much to tell. And just one more thing, what's your prized possession from show business that you have in your office?
Oh,
and it'll be difficult probably to choose one, but what's the thing that you love, whether it's something signed or just a script?
It is something signed, and it's a story I tell actually in my name dropping about Bertha Kitt only did one pantomime.
Oh.
And Alan and I were in it, and it was at the Manchester Palace. And we did that season with Eartha and had a great time with her. She was a lovely lady. And then we did a week's music hall at the City Varieties Leeds with Eartha topping the bill.
Oh,
so we did the 2 seasons with her.
amazing.
We did the pantomime and immediately followed it with a week of old-time music hall. And she was brilliant. And I don't do this often. I haven't done this often with people, but I went out and bought a picture. I found a picture of Eartha Kitt, and I gave it to her and said, "Would you sign this for me, Eartha, please?" She said, "Leave it with me." And I've now got that picture framed up in my study here in Dartford. And I never explained to people why Eartha wrote this inscription on it. So when they read it, they look at me quite quizzically, because she wrote on it, "To Keith, from Eartha, with lots of love, it was fun both times."
Oh, you could just leave it there and not tell them the history of that.
Well,
you
that's
know?
it. See, Orson Welles once described her as one of the most exciting women in the world.
Yeah.
They are, and she wrote that to me, so
Oh.
what do you mean by that? And I say, and Fran doesn't mind that picture being up, I tell you.
No, she knows the real story. But
Yeah, that's
Did she do this in the panto, and can you do it? Oh, did she do that?
She did do it. She was the genie of the lamp in the panto. I can't do it, but no, she did it extremely well. But no, she was great.
Oh, brilliant. Well, you've done everything extremely well. I love you, mate, as a water rat brother, as a friend. Thank you, Keith.
Cheers, Steve. You and Nina and your lovely family. Great stuff, and keep more power to your elbow, mate. And lovely doing these things, because it just gets these stories out to people, and hopefully when the theatres, when we can all go back, people will be flocking in to see the shows.
Thanks so much.
See ya, bye.
Eyes and teeth.
Thanks so much to Keith Simmons, who entertained me thoroughly today. It was a pleasure getting to know him after being in awe of him and Alan, his brother, in my early years. To find out more about Keith and Simmons, check out on Twitter at SAS Keith and Ben, or his personal website www.keithsimmons.moonfruit.com, and for Keith and Ben, www.simmonsandsimmons.org.uk. Today's comedy and water rat quote comes from Sir Norman Wisdom. As you get older, 3 things happen. The first thing is your memory goes, and I can't remember the other 2. Eyes and Teeth is written, produced and hosted by Steve Hewlett. Vocals provided by Lola, Larissa and Nina Hewlett. Special guest vocals by Rich T. Eyes and Teeth music and jingles are produced and performed by the one and only Mr. Kevin Dean. Listen in to the last edition of Season 4, The Water Rats, when I'll be speaking with past King Rat, music star, comedy and movie icon and pin-up, Jess Conrad.